Welcome back. You're watching Startup Central with me, Nayantara, working from home. Today, the Commerce Ministry held its second round of meetings with e-commerce companies like Amazon, Flipkart, Snapdeal, etc., etc. What the government has instructed the e-commerce companies to do is to start enlisting the country of origin for all products on these e-commerce platforms beginning 1st of August. This is for new listings. For all listings, all of this is going to have to be updated by the end of September. Sources telling ET now the e-commerce companies are seeking more time. I'm going to discuss this now with well-known venture capitalist Siddarth Pai. Hi Siddarth, good to have you on the show. Hope you and everyone at your team is safe and healthy. I want to just understand from you, when I speak to my sources in the Commerce Ministry, they tell me, Nayantara, this was always the case, this was always the law. What we have done is just remind the e-commerce companies that they've got to do this. They weren't doing it and they've got to do it. We've just reminded them of that. Is it really as simple as that? And is it not reasonable to know what you're buying, where it's made? I'm leaving out the China angle, I'm leaving out all of those angles, but shouldn't that anyway be the usual practice? Whenever you buy something, on that packaging, it's always written made in India, made in China, made in Korea, made in Vietnam.
That's right. So I think it has actually been common practice and an expectation from all the consumers, especially to find out the country of origin of the products they buy. There's been a heightened amount of consciousness amongst the investors as well, especially in light of Atmanirbhar Bharat in India, especially about this new Swadeshi 2.0 that India is going through as of now. So that heightened consciousness has actually awakened the need for these particular older laws to actually come in. India traditionally has been a country where we have a number of laws and statutes on the books, but the enforcement of that is usually ends up being quite selective at some time. So what the Commerce Ministry is saying as of now is, look, this has already existed on the books for quite some time. It has been enforced as strictly as possible. We're going to start increasing the amount of enforcement that actually happens. And from the consumer standpoint as well, a number of consumers are now eager to actually know the country of origin for their various products, because it becomes more than a matter of prestige, it becomes a matter of awareness as well. Most of the consumers now, especially when it comes to discretionary spending, are actually using their wallets to actually vote. And if it's aligned with the practices that a certain country follows or not, be it China, be it any of the countries across the entire world. So I think that heightened level of consciousness is now being enforced by the government as well. And this e-commerce companies are also cognizant of it. What will happen for them is a logistical issue of trying to actually trace back the supply chains as of now, because the global supply chains have ended up being dislocated over time. So the government should be sensitive to that as well, and actually afford them the amount of time within a reasonable time frame for this.
So then from what you're telling me, the venture capitalist community, the investor community is not going to be alarmed by this move, because if you look at it in recent times for e-commerce companies, there have been what I might call shocks. The new definition of marketplace, how they were not allowed to keep inventory, the rules of the games had changed, and that also after a massive investment by Walmart into Flipkart. So you're saying that this is not one of those shocks?
This is not an industry-wide shock compared to the other shocks that the e-commerce industry has happened. I think every time the Department of Commerce revisits the e-commerce policy, it usually sends shudder waves across the entire startup and the VC community at large. This particular move, I do believe, has been anticipated by a number of people, and there have been various movements by Flipkart, by Amazon, by Snapdeal, and some of the larger players to sort of align behind informing their customers as to the supply chains that happen and become more responsible when it comes to reporting. So it's not that much of a shock that's actually happening for them as of now. And it has been a statute on the books for quite some time as well, and common practice also. I think what the e-commerce companies are trying to grapple with as of now is this is an additional compliance that they need to do at a time when most of the supply chains are already fraught and the consumer spending has actually come down dramatically compared to where it was a couple of quarters ago or pre-COVID as well. So they view this as an additional burden that's become more hard for them, given the current hardship they're already undergoing as of now.
Okay, then the other point I want to ask you then is that why this resistance from the e-commerce companies? You saw the kind of commentary that came out after the first meeting. Even today they're seeking more time. Why this kind of resistance? And e-commerce companies off the record say, consumers don't care about it. They never click on the tab to know where where the products are made. Some of us have tabs which show the Made in India stores, but nobody's going there.
So I think, the Made in So with regard to consumer behavior, it also depends upon the type of product as well. There are certain products that the consumers aren't very fussy about when it comes to the country of origin. Some of the more staples, etc., that they're very comfortable with over time. But there are certain high value, high branded or high value items where they actually are curious to see what the provenance of the item is and where it's actually been done. From the e-commerce company's perspective as well, there would be an additional incurrence of cost when it comes to actually running an audit across the entire supply chain to make sure that it adheres to the various laws and the various stipulations when it comes to these matters as well. And at a time when their revenues have actually come down significantly, large portions of the country are still under a larger portion of lockdown, consumer spending hasn't increased. They are actually viewing this as a sort of additional burden that they need to actually comply with as of now. If the same thing was actually done, I think about a year ago or something, the noise would have been there. It's actually been true because it's an additional burden on them, but it may have been far more muted than what we're seeing as of now. So this wasn't something entirely new, and some of the people we've spoken to as well, unofficially have told us that it's become a hassle when you're dealing with a large number of SKUs. Because what happens over here, especially this is important, that the burden of proof actually falls upon the e-commerce company as opposed to the actual seller. So in case something, God forbid, does actually come out, the liability is going to be borne by them. So they'll have to put in additional resources to give them considerable proof and considerable comfort that what is actually being put out there on the e-commerce site is actually valid, regardless of the contracts, etc., that they do sign. So these are the additional complications that are incumbent upon the business model that's actually causing the e-commerce companies to sort of speak about this in this particular fashion. So a more graded approach would have been more widely accepted by the e-commerce companies. But I think the e-commerce companies, ever since over the past couple of months, have understood which way the winds are actually turning as of now. Some of them have also taken proactive measures to start informing their consumers about these kind of things. And I believe these efforts will end up being accelerated as of now as time goes by.
Sid, it's always great talking to you. Siddarth Pai for you, ladies and gentlemen, decoding the decision taken by the government today. Let's see how this one pans out. Thanks a lot for being a part of Startup Central.
Thank you very much, Nayantara.